Welcome, everybody. It's Wednesday. It's calling the shots. Look who I got. My buddy Andrew Branca is here today. What's up, Andrew? Good to have you, pal.
Good to be here, Nate. Always a pleasure.
This week, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just tuning in, this is Calling the Shots. We talk about where are you safe using your self-defense and you're inside the boundaries of the laws. A lot of us carry firearms to protect ourselves and our families. Where are you protected by the law? We're going to talk about that. We have some video to watch. We're going to put you in the driver's seat so you tell us if it's a good shot or a bad shot. We're going to play a video in segments here, and then you're going to tell us. And then Andrew is going to break it down. So I hope you all have the 5 elements of self-defense law, which you downloaded for free at lawofselfdefense.com/CTS, calling the shots, elements. And yeah, if you don't have it, go get it right now and have that there so you can know the 5 elements. We're going to be talking about that. So it is Wednesday. It is calling the shots. You know what else? It's time to fire away.
There he is.
Oh, are we live? We're here. Did you see that cool mug? I think you could pick one of those up too. The lawofselfdefense.com.
lawofselfdefense.com/mug.
/mug. It's very difficult to remember that one. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. Thank you for joining us here live on Facebook. I know you've got something you want to talk about, Andrew. So if you want to dive in there, take it away. Got anything going on right now? The lawofselfdefense.com.
Oh, lots of stuff. So we're still running, folks, our free book offer for all of you in the Alien Gear community, Calling the Shots community. Get a copy of our book. This normally sells on Amazon for, I think it's $25 plus shipping and handling. Take a look at it at Amazon, folks. It's got a 5-star rating, hundreds of reviews. People like it a lot. You can get it for free. We do ask you to cover the shipping and handling, but the book itself is free, and you can get that at lawofselfdefense.com/CTS book. I think there might be a graphic for that. I'm not sure.
Yep, we had that up there.
No, there it is. lawofselfdefense.com/CTS book. Best-selling book on Amazon for self-defense law. So there's always that. And of course, as Nate said, folks, if you don't understand what we're talking about when we talk about the 5 elements of a claim of self-defense, if you don't understand these 5 elements, you don't understand self-defense law. You can't understand self-defense law without these 5 elements because they are the building blocks of self-defense law. The good news, we have this free infographic, absolutely free. Just go to lawofselfdefense.com/CTS elements. If you don't already have it, open up another tab in your browser, download it. It's that quick, and you'll be able to get the maximum value out of these Calling the Shot shows as possible.
There we go. Hey, thanks all of you for showing up today. We really appreciate you being here. Again, we're going to show a clip. It's broken down in sections. We're going to break it down. Andrew's going to break it down. You guys are going to call the shots. So we're going to run a poll. It's going to say, is this a good shot or bad shot? You just got to click on the poll, yes or no, and if it's a good shot or bad shot. And then you be the judge, so to speak. So
a little background on this one. This is a case involving a man who decided to take a nap on a Chicago subway car. Not a prudent thing to do, and it doesn't work out well for him. He becomes a target of criminal predators. He doesn't actually have a gun, so we're not going to see shooting in this video. But what we'll do is we'll pause the video at various stages of the encounter and ask the hypothetical, if he had a gun and fired it at this point with what's going on, would that have been a good shoot or a not good shoot? That's what we'll ask you to respond to in the poll.
So here we go. Let's take a look.
Okay, so here we have the video. There's the man sleeping on the right. There's a woman there who I had circled a moment before. She's trying to pick his pocket. She saw that he was sleeping. He's essentially in condition white, completely unaware of his environment. So she's reaching into his pockets, asking her friends to be quiet. Her friends are arguably accomplices here, acting as lookouts. She can't seem to get into his pocket very well. He's also leaning against the backpack, against the seat. She moves around to the other side of him, still reaching into his pockets, trying to grab whatever she can find while he's asleep. But of course, he doesn't stay asleep forever. Sleeping Beauty wakes up to find that he's being targeted by this pickpocket, and he shoves her away. So he's just starting to rouse right there. Wakey, wakey, you're getting robbed. That's when he wakes up, and he kind of shoves her away. Now the video will loop again. And the question is for the audience. Now, there's a couple things happening here, of course. We have both a defense of persons and a defense of property situation. Defense of property, obviously, she's trying to steal his property. Defense of persons, she's doing it against his person. The moment she touches him, she's committing a battery, what we would call a simple battery, a battery not involving an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, not involving a deadly weapon, but nevertheless a criminal act above and beyond the theft of property she's attempting to commit. So the question is, when this man wakes up to discover that someone is trying to steal his property out of his pockets as he's asleep, if he had a gun and he pulled that gun to defend himself, would that be a good shoot or a bad shoot under these circumstances? Can we get that poll up, Nate?
It's up and running.
Oh, it is. Okay, I don't see it on my end.
It might take a second. We just clicked it. So right here you go. You're watching the video. Is it a good shoot? Is it a bad shoot? You make the call. We're going to keep watching this video here. It's looping right now. And then,
so don't forget, folks, if you want to get that 5 elements infographic, that's just at lawselfdefense.com/CTS for calling the shots elements. And if you'd like to take advantage of the free book offer, just point your browser to lawselfdefense.com/CTS book. Do it after the show, folks. So we don't want to lose you as an audience member, of course.
Andrew, right about now, the poll's running at about 96% of people are saying it's a bad shoot.
Yeah, it would be a bad shoot because, of course, you can only use deadly defensive force if you're facing an imminent deadly force threat. And as offensive as this conduct might be by this thief, it doesn't represent an imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury to this man. Of course, it is a property crime, and it is a simple battery, a battery not involving an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, but it is unlawful conduct against him, and he is permitted to use force to stop that theft of his property, that battery against his person, but he'd be restricted to using non-deadly force to defend himself, which he kind of does. He kind of shoves out with his left hand as if pushing the woman away. Now, one thing that doesn't often come up or sometimes confuses people, generally when we talk about the element of proportionality covered in our infographic, folks, the element of proportionality, we generally describe it to differentiate between the two primary buckets of intensity of force in a self-defense situation, and that's the deadly force bucket and the non-deadly force bucket. So deadly force meaning all forms of force readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. The non-deadly force bucket being all lesser degrees of force, all force not readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. Now, when you're in the deadly force bucket, there's no continuum of force there. There's no difference between one form of deadly force and another. The law doesn't care whether someone's being shot or hit in the head with a baseball bat or cut with a machete or thrown off a tall building or having an anvil dropped on their head from a great height. If it's force capable of causing death or serious bodily injury, it's deadly force regardless of the particular form it takes. All deadly force is equal to all other deadly force. That's not true if we're in the non-deadly force bucket. If we're in the non-deadly force bucket, there is a continuum of force. Not all forms of non-deadly force are equal to each other. So there's a difference between poking someone in the chest with your finger and punching someone in the face with your fist. They both may qualify as non-deadly force, but one is obviously of a greater intensity than the other. So when you're in the non-deadly force bucket and you're facing a non-deadly force threat, you have to make sure that your non-deadly force response is proportional within that non-deadly force bucket. So the mere fact that you'd be entitled to use non-deadly force doesn't mean you'd be entitled to use just any kind of non-deadly force that you'd like. So, for example, this man on the subway, he wakes up, he sees someone's trying to reach into his pockets. He can use non-deadly force to defend himself, but not any kind of non-deadly force. So a typical example of non-deadly force we often use as an example is pepper spray. I have my own pepper spray right here that I carry about on my person every day. Pepper spray is a form of non-deadly force. Would it be appropriate for this man, when he sees this woman trying to pick his pockets, to use pepper spray to stop her? Well, maybe not. I would argue probably not, especially in a confined space like a subway car. If you spray someone in that car with OC, you sprayed everybody in that car with OC, including yourself, by the way. Now, may that be worth it under certain circumstances? Absolutely. Would it be worth it when a shove with your bare hand would accomplish the same thing? Probably not. Now, of course, this man didn't use OC. He basically just shoved the woman away. And then we'll proceed with events in the next video clip, which backs up just a little bit, comes back to when he's awake, and then events proceed from there.
Let's take a look.
So here's the man. He's still asleep, but he's going to wake up in just a moment. He's going to reach out with his left hand and kind of shove this woman away. That's a perfectly legitimate use of non-deadly force to stop the theft being committed against them and the battery. Here he goes, wakes up. We see him move his left hand, and events escalate rapidly. The woman who is picking his pocket starts punching him, drags him out of his seat, drags him along the floor of the subway car, beats him some more. So now she's not merely trying to commit a pickpocket offense. She's not committing the simple battery as simple a battery as she was before by just touching him. Now she's actually committing a violent act upon him. So the question then becomes, at this point in the confrontation, she's dragged him along the ground. She's beating him on the ground. If he had a gun, would that be a legally appropriate circumstance for him to use that gun in self-defense against this attack? So that should be the poll.
The poll is up, so there you go. She has him on the ground. She's dragging him across the ground. She's standing over him, and she's obviously punching him. So you make the call. At this point, when she's over him, can he draw his firearm and use the as deadly force? That is the good shoot, bad shoot. Is it a good shoot or is it a bad shoot? You make the call. And there we go. We're going to let the video continue to loop here for a second.
Yep. Now, I notice in passing, do you folks see anybody coming to this guy's rescue?
No.
No. Folks, that could happen, theoretically, but you certainly can't count on it. You are your own first responder. That's a large part of what we do here at Law Self-Defense, is to position you to be your own first responder in a way that not only can you win that physical fight, but you can also win the legal fight that follows. Nobody's helping this dude. He's on his own.
That's part of the issue there, right? I mean, well, you're going to see more of this video too, but he's on his own, all by himself.
And of course, now he's on his back, which is a very difficult position to defend from. It doesn't look to me like this woman attacking him is substantially smaller than him. So the normal paradigm of a smaller woman and a larger man doesn't really apply in these circumstances. He's 68 years old, by the way. So she may well be stronger and more fit than he is.
Absolutely.
Now, so we have poll results?
Yeah, poll is looking like 67% of people think this is a bad shot still. 33% of people say it's a good shot. Take it.
Yeah, so it gets a little sketchier. Right now, the guy is actually subject to a physical beating. He's in a difficult to defend position. He is substantially older, probably frailer than the person attacking him. Certainly, if this became a sustained beating, if she continued to beat him on the ground, well, then you could argue the beatings approached a level where she is imminently threatening, if not death, then serious bodily injury. We know, for example, from the case of George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin was unarmed, they like to say, but he was beating Zimmerman's head against the sidewalk. Well, that's a form of attack, a use of force that can readily result in death or serious bodily injury. Whenever I have people challenge me on that, I always ask them, well, will you permit me, sir, to please bang your head against the sidewalk just once? And they always decline. Because, of course, we all know that is, in fact, a deadly force threat, one that can cause death or serious bodily injury. So if this attack became sustained, it could potentially reach a level where it qualified as a deadly force attack. But we don't see that in the few seconds of the attack that we see in this video. So let's go ahead and proceed to the next video now and see what happens. So I backed it up again a little bit. We're going to go pretty much, he'll wake up, we'll go right to the attack. She'll drag him out of his chair, drag him on the floor, beat him down a bit. So here's the attack, here's the drag. By the way, I doubt this is her first fist fight, folks. So she's beating him. Someone gets her attention, and suddenly she runs away. She runs up the aisle, and that's where the video stops here and begins to loop again. So she beat him several blows while he was on his back, but it was not a sustained beating. She actually then fled up the subway car. At that point, would it have been appropriate for him to use deadly force in self-defense? So that would be the next poll.
As she's fleeing, is that the question, Andrew?
As she's fleeing.
As she's fleeing, is it a good shot or a bad shot? That's the question. There's the poll. Go ahead and vote right there.
It's possible that during the beating could have reached a point that you could characterize it as a deadly force attack against which the use of the gun might have been lawful if the beating had been sustained. The question is, once the beating has stopped, even if it would have been lawful for him to use his gun while the beating was taking place, once it's stopped and she's fled, is it still appropriate for him
Andrew, I think the Alien Gear family here is really smart because the poll is saying 98% not a good shot.
Right. And that's because what's happened now is, as we refer to the element of imminence, even though there was an imminent threat is a threat that's either actually occurring or immediately about to occur. Well, this threat was actually occurring. He was getting a beat down. Once that window of imminence opens, well, then you're facing an imminent threat against which you can use defensive force. But fights are dynamic, and it's not uncommon for that window of imminence to open and then the window of imminence to close because circumstances have changed. When this woman stops her beating and flees down the subway car, whatever imminence might have existed even a moment before is now gone. That fight is over. I work in a lot of cases where we have clients who were initial victims of an attack. They were attacked by somebody. Then their attacker, for whatever reason, flees, and they decide they're going to pursue their attacker. They're not going to let them get away with punching them like that. Well, what happens in that circumstance, folks, is you may have been the initial victim in a first fight, but when your attacker flees and you pursue him, what you've just done is you've now begun a second fight in which you are the initial aggressor, the unlawful aggressor. You don't have that required element of innocence for a claim of self-defense. In fact, the other person, the person who was attacking you shortly before, now they're the innocent victim in the second fight. They can justify their use of force against you now as self-defense in that second fight, and you cannot. So once the fight is over, folks, the fight is over. And if you do anything that could be interpreted as reinitiating that conflict, even if you were innocent in the first fight, you're easily characterized as an unlawful aggressor in the second fight.
Here we go. We are ready for the next version. So shall we play this?
Okay, so here's the beatdown taking place, the dragging. She beats him on the ground a little bit. Something gets her attention. One of the comments says somebody told her the police were coming. Maybe, whatever reason, she runs away. He gets up, he gets back in his chair. But now he suddenly finds himself surrounded by a crowd for whom he's the center of their attention, presumably an angry crowd of people. It's a scary thing. This woman might have fled and told a bunch of people, hey, this guy just tried to grab me, right? So they may be acting in what they think is a lawful way. They may think this guy is an unlawful creep of some kind. They're coming to give him a piece of their mind by surrounding him in this very aggressive manner. Of course, this guy's pinned, right? He's in that little corner seat. He's stuck in the confines of a subway car. There's no place for him to go. He couldn't retreat even if he wanted to, which means, of course, that even if he were in a duty to retreat jurisdiction, that duty would not apply because a duty to retreat only applies if you have a safe way to do that. He certainly does not here. So he's just woken up. He's been attacked by this woman, beaten in the aisle. She runs away. He manages to get to his seat, and now he finds himself surrounded by an angry mob. At this point, if he had a gun, would it be legally appropriate for him to use that gun in defense against this mob? That's the question for the next poll.
Here we go. Let's roll this poll. What do you think? Can he use deadly force right here? He's got the, I don't know, looks like 4, maybe 5 people surrounding him. He's backed up into a little corner on the subway. At this point, they haven't really touched him, harmed him in any way, but they could be verbally threatening him. Who knows? But is it a good shoot if right here, right now, at the end of that video, he pulls his firearm and shoots to kill?
It's certainly understandable. It would be scary, right? You've just been woken from a sleep, beaten, and now you find yourself surrounded by an angry
individuals. What do you think? What are you guys going to do? You're going to shoot, or you're not going to shoot? Take the poll. As of right now, 78% of people are saying this is a bad shot. Don't take it. And
right. So the critical factor, of course, is really, it's always the same, folks. Self-defense law is not rocket science. The question is, for him to be justified in the use of deadly defensive force, is he facing an imminent deadly force threat? Does that crowd represent an imminent deadly force threat? And it's hard for us to know that just from the video. We can speculate about facts that could suggest an imminent deadly force threat. And also keep in mind, you're not required to suffer injury before you can defend yourself. You're allowed to defend yourself against an imminent threat, a threat that's immediately about to occur. So you have to be able to make reasonable inferences from the evidence in front of you to decide that you are or are not facing an imminent threat of deadly force capable of causing your death or serious bodily injury. Now, he's surrounded by this mob. Is that conduct consistent with threatening? Probably. We don't know what they're saying to him, but they could be making verbal threats to cause him death or serious bodily injury. Now, verbal threats alone, and I mean strictly words alone, are never enough to justify the use of defensive force. But verbal threats can be serious enough that you don't need to see much physical conduct consistent with that threat in order for the combination of the verbal threat and the physical conduct to reasonably infer an imminent deadly force threat. So, for example, someone threatens to shoot you. Well, that's just words, right? They verbally say, I'm going to shoot you. If they're literally just standing there, not making any movements at all, that verbal threat alone is not enough to justify the use of defensive force against them. But you don't need to see much in the way of physical conduct for the combination of words and conduct to constitute an imminent threat. So if he says, I'm going to shoot you, and then he reaches for his waistband in a manner consistent with reaching for the gun that he would need to shoot you, well, that combination of the verbal threat and the physical conduct can reasonably infer an imminent deadly force threat. So they've got him surrounded. That's threatening conduct. Depending on what they're saying, it could potentially constitute an imminent deadly force threat. It's ambiguous, right? Because we don't have enough evidence, all the evidence we would like. And of course, it's in that zone of ambiguity that good guys get in trouble on self-defense claims. So it's a hard call to make. And really, I always say only the person on the spot can make the decision ultimately on whether or not they infer from the circumstances before them that deadly defensive force would be appropriate. I can only urge people to put themselves in a position where they can make that choice in an informed way, knowing what the variables are that the law will ultimately look like, to look at to decide whether or not their inference of a threat was a reasonable threat.
Yeah, you want to be prepared. You don't know what's going to happen next. You could explain to them that maybe you feel, threatened to back up. I would just be ready. If that's because you don't know what's happening next. And speaking of,
by the way, would that be an appropriate circumstance, even if you don't believe the use of deadly force would be appropriate, for the use of non-deadly force to be appropriate? That OC canister.
Oh, yeah.
At that point, right? It's no longer just a woman trying to reach into his pocket. Now he's surrounded by, frightening, threatening, dangerous crowd of people. There's a disparity of numbers there. He's trapped in his position. Now, again, pepper spray in those close confines of a subway car means everybody gets sprayed, including you. But that may be worth it, right? If it keeps you from getting a beat down from a crowd of angry people. By the way, if he had used pepper spray before, earlier in this confrontation, and I'm not saying he should have, I'm just speaking tactically now, that subway car would be completely fogged with pepper spray. And I could assure you that no one who is not extraordinarily motivated would voluntarily go into that environment. I don't know if all of you have been exposed to pepper spray. I have. It's really unpleasant. And you don't need much pepper spray in a confined area for it to be extremely uncomfortable. Your eyes start to burn, your throat starts to burn. It's just not a place that you want to be. Good for dispersing crowds.
Okay, so let's talk about being prepared, what's happening next, not knowing what is going to happen next. So what do I see? What does happen next?
So he gets surrounded by the crowd, and what do? They do, in fact, launch an attack, a vicious attack. We see someone hanging from the overhead bars of the subway car so they can bring both their feet to bear against this guy. He has multiple attackers punching at him. Now, I see these two guys here in the blue hats. They seem to be wearing identical blue hats. I'm not an expert in criminal gangs, so I don't know if that could be an insignia of colors of some kind of a gang, but he might know. People in Chicago might know. This might be a common thing. And if that were knowledge he possessed, that could certainly play a role in his perception of an imminent deadly force threat. But he doesn't really need it. I mean, these kicks to the face are certainly, even by that one guy, are certainly force capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. And of course, it's not just the one guy. The disparity of numbers alone makes it likely that this attack could cause death or serious bodily injury, kicks or no kicks. So under this circumstance, had he a gun, would this be a lawfully appropriate opportunity to use that gun in self-defense?
I think this one's an easier one, right, Andrew? But here's my question, and this is my question to you, Andrew, actually. So now we're going to ask you to answer this one. At this moment, when you're watching this video, obviously his face is hidden. He's trying to cover his eyes and his face, so he can't really see, if he's trying to protect himself. Even if he were to get to a gun and pull the gun, where does he shoot? Who does he shoot? How does, what does he do? You just start shooting? You just start, what are you going to do, Andrew, at this point?
Yeah, so it's a difficult circumstance on a number of levels. One is the priority level is you have to, of course, the top priority is you have to survive the fight. If you don't survive the fight, nothing else really matters. So you need to do what you need to do in order to be alive at the end of this confrontation. Now, in terms of who you shoot, the way the law looks at a mob attack is under a legal doctrine called accomplice liability. So if people are working together cooperatively to commit some unlawful act, they're each responsible collectively for what everybody in that group does. So a classic example would be somebody's robbing a liquor store and his buddy is out on the sidewalk acting as a lookout. Well, the buddy never walked into the liquor store, never pointed a gun, never demanded money, never did any of the things we think of as being associated with an armed robbery. But because he was working as an accomplice to the guy who did do all those things, he's as equally guilty of armed robbery as the guy who went into the store with the gun. Well, if it's a gang attack, everyone cooperating in that gang attack is an accomplice, and therefore each is responsible for the worst conduct of the group. Another example would be if you were having your arms held by two guys, so a third guy could stab you. Well, you're allowed to use deadly defensive force against the guy trying to stab you, of course. You'd also be allowed to use deadly defensive force against the guys holding you to be stabbed because they're working collaboratively with the guy with the knife. They're all equally responsible for creating an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to you. In this kind of mob attack, anybody working collaboratively with this mob in the attack is as responsible for the worst behavior of a member of that group. So certainly the guy suspended from the bars, kicking him at his face, that's a deadly force threat there. There's no question about it. So everybody working with him in the attack is also guilty of using deadly force in this attack. Now, of course, there's also innocent people there, right? So there are people there who presumably are not involved in the attack. If you fire a bullet, what happens if you hit one of those innocent people? Unintentionally, you were trying to hit one of the people attacking you, but your bullet misses. Under these circumstances, that would not be hard to imagine. Or your bullet doesn't miss, but it overpenetrates and it goes on to hit an innocent person. The legal doctrine that would apply there is called transferred intent. And basically what that doctrine says is if your intent to fire the shot was good, lawful intent, so the firing of the shot was done in lawful self-defense, and your bullet unintentionally hits somebody else, the good intent towards your attacker, shooting at your attacker, is transferred over to the innocent victim. So you ought not have criminal liability for having unintentionally shot that innocent victim under the doctrine of transferred intent. Of course, that's not anything any of us would ever want to happen. Obviously, for one of our bullets to accidentally hit an innocent person, even if it resulted in no criminal liability for us, it would be a terrible thing to have happen.
Absolutely. This is one of those things I always advocate for. Create distance. Distance is your best friend. And in these situations, you never know what's going to come from it. So you're sitting on the subway. In this situation, create distance, because you could be the innocent bystander, right? It's so hard to come up with a scenario right now of a solution because if I'm there, my heart wants me to jump in and get involved, and I have done that in a couple of situations, and sometimes it's actually not the best idea to get involved, even though I used to think it was the best thing to always do was to get involved, and it's hard because you fight with your heart, wanting to get involved and help somebody, and you're wanting to do what's best and do what's good and help somebody, and there's certain ways that you can do that, and it's just a tough situation. In terms
of coming to someone else's defense, the black letter of the law is you'd be entitled to use force on this guy's behalf to the same extent he'd be entitled to use force to defend himself. So whatever force he'd be allowed to use himself, you're allowed to use that degree of force on his behalf. But here's the problem. Do you really know what's going on? I mean, from this video, of course, we see what happened. It was a pickpocket attempt. He woke up, the woman beat him. But typically, we only become aware that a confrontation is happening because it's already begun. And therefore, we don't know what triggered the confrontation. We don't know who the initial aggressor was. We don't know why it started or who's actually in the right or wrong. And if you come to the wrong person's defense because you didn't know what was actually going on, you have a lot of legal liability there, because if your right to use force on that person's behalf extends only as far as their right. If they would have had no right to use force because, say, they were the initial aggressor. Oh, did we just lose the show?
No, we're here. Keep going.
Well, I lost my connection to Alien Gear, but I'll see if we're still connected.
My camera real quick, Riley?
If they would have had no right to use force in their own defense, then you would have no right to use force on their behalf, and you'd have complete legal liability.
Yeah. I mean,
another couple of factors here are things to consider both before and after these events actually occurred. One is before. So this guy became a target of attack specifically because of his own conduct. In other words, he became a target of criminal predators because he was asleep in the subway car. I'm an older guy, so I took my self-defense training years ago. When I did, I took it from guys like Colonel Jeff Cooper, who's famous for, among other things, his Cooper color codes, different color-coded levels of awareness that you ought to have when you're out in public. The lowest level of awareness, not appropriate for being out in public, was what he called condition white. Condition white is when you're completely unaware of your environment. Typically, it's people buried in their cell phones or just simply completely unaware of their environment. But the ultimate condition white, folks, is to be asleep, to be literally unconscious in a public place. And nothing looks more attractive to predators than prey that is completely unaware of its environment. I doubt very much this guy would ever have been targeted if he'd simply been awake in that seat and not asleep. Him being asleep made him a target for that attack.
Yeah, and that's the big...
So don't do that, folks, okay?
Yeah, that's
another thing to consider is after the attack. Let's imagine, hypothetically, he's getting kicked in the face. He's facing what we believe to be a deadly force threat by that mass beating at the end. He pulls his gun. He fires a shot. He actually hits one of the people trying to cause him serious bodily injury. So a legit self-defense use of force. He doesn't hit any innocents. But what happens the moment that shot is fired? That subway car clears out. everybody runs away. And as a result, who's left in that car when the cops show up? It's that guy with his gun and the victim that he shot, which is what the law will call that person, the victim, even though that person was just trying to kick him in the head. He's the victim of the defender's use of force. And it's likely that victim is a teenager. Looks like it to me from this video, in which case he's likely to be characterized by the media and by prosecutors as a quote-unquote child. Now we'll have an older gentleman with a gun who just murdered a child on a subway car. That's not a good look, folks. Now, again, I'm not telling you not to defend yourself. You have to survive the physical fight, but I want you to be aware of what the downstream consequences are likely to look at. And you might be a very attractive target of prosecution if it can be made to look as if you'd shot an unarmed child for what they will say is no good reason. Certainly, that's what led to the prosecution of George Zimmerman. Ultimately, George Zimmerman was acquitted of every single criminal charge very quickly by the jury in his trial. But nevertheless, that was the accusation made against him then and still made against him today, that he shot an unarmed child for no good reason. It's a tough battle. You can win that battle if you, in fact, kept your conduct in self-defense within the boundaries of those 5 elements of the law of self-defense. Well, then your use of force was lawful, and that's a good fight for you to win at trial. But it might require that you do have to go through that process and the punishment and the expense of that trial.
Wow.
Andrew, okay, folks, I think that's all I have to say, but it looks like I've lost my connection to Nate.
Well, he's
the Alien Gear crew, so I'm kind of at loose ends. At this point, I think I'll just turn things back over to Nate to take control of the show.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. What a great show, and thank you guys for tuning in. Again, situational awareness. I know a lot of you are putting that in the comments. Being aware of your surroundings. That's a key element. I don't care if you're on a subway train, you're walking through your car with a grocery cart full of groceries. You always need to know what's going on around you. Look, these bad guys look for easy targets. If you're a hard target, you're probably not going to be targeted. They want something that's very going to be easy for them to target. They're usually going to look for some sort of distraction or create a distraction sometimes too. And so just make sure you're aware, even when now you're being distracted, where you come to your car and your window's busted out and now you're focused on that. That's probably when the thing's going to go down. So always be aware of your environment and what's going on. Be prepared. Know these 5 elements so that you can work within the boundaries of the law of self-defense so that you don't end up spending the rest of your life behind bars. Train. And I'm going to remind you guys, actually, I'm going to tell you, next week, Andrew will be here, so we're going to be at the range. I'm going to be doing some videos, then we're going to go live from the range. We might have to bump that time up just a little bit, but we definitely will be live still at 3. And we're going to be giving you some drills that you can do from home. I'm going to tell you what you need to bring to next Wednesday's show. A couple of spare mag carriers if you have those. You don't need any ammo. We're going to be doing some things for you to practice at home. And then we're going to be uploading some videos on YouTube, some training videos for you too, about a weekly video for you guys to be practicing some things, whether it's going to be at home or you can go to the range. But we're going to be talking about training, because training is an important part of all of this as well. Because even if you know the law, even if you own a gun, even if you have the ammo and you don't know how to use it, it's probably not going to work out real good for you. It's just part of your obligation, I believe. And we're going to get you shooting amazingly, right, Riley? Yes, today we were at the range and we did some pretty cool stuff, which is the first time I was able to do something cool like that. But that's going to be next week. Tomorrow's our raffle, so make sure you're signed up for our raffle. I guess Andrew's gone. So make sure you signed up for our raffle. That's at aliengearholsters.com/contest. Tomorrow is the last day you can sign up for that Smith & Wesson MP9 Shield EZ. You're going to want to win that and all the other cool stuff that comes along with it. And stay tuned, because we're going to have some really cool news for you as far as tax season is among us. And we're going to be launching some really cool deals. So make sure that you guys are tuning in. As soon as I have those, we're going to let you know. I know Andrew's gone, but I just want to say thank you to Andrew, and I want to say thank you to all of you. And I really do hope that this is valuable stuff for you. we certainly appreciate the time that Andrew takes. And I know over the last year, I've learned a lot personally, able to actually answer people's questions when correctly, I guess. I could answer them before, it just probably wasn't correct. So now I'm actually able to give them the actual correct answers. And there's a lot more information. Get the free book. Just pay the shipping and handling. lawofselfdefense.com/CTS, or it's either book/book, I believe, or CTS book, but it doesn't matter. We're going to have more for you to win. We're going to have more for you. It is CTS book. There you go. It's a free book. And I hope to see you back here tomorrow. That is it for today and for this week for calling the shots. So we'll be here for the raffle tomorrow. Get signed up. From all of us at Alien Gear, please carry safe, carry comfort, carry on.